What experience of yours is so crazy, you don't tell people about it because they wouldn't believe you? When I was younger I worked at a popular theme park in the UK as a ride assistant. One of the rides I worked on was the river rapids. Two young Scouse lads who had obviously been drinking got on and it was clear they were going to be a pain in the ass. As their raft came towards the end, they both were running around the outsides of it. The raft hits the wall and they both fell in. This is near the lift section of the ride, which if they'd been snagged would have torn them up badly. I ran down and God knows how managed to pull them both out. They were both swiftly escorted to the medical center and I'm assuming off park. The same day, after I finished work, I went to go and see a friend for a few hours and on my way home I follow a car that is all over the place. The car hits a curb and flips onto its roof. I stop my car, run across, yank the doors open and pull both of the occupants out. Same to lads I'd pulled out of the water at work earlier in the day. I was on a train and this train had one of those chains which you pull in case of an emergency and it stops the train, and if you pull it for no reason you can face up to 2 years in prison and a huge fine. So I was just sitting and when I decided to get up to go to the washroom, I was kind of stuck, so I used the nearest thing to help me get up and what I pulled was the chain. Suddenly the train stopped and I was like, oh crap, here I go to the prison. When suddenly people started running out of the train. PS the train had no doors. You would understand if you know what an average local Indian train looks like. I don't know about other countries. And what I realized was that a compartment of the train was on fire. So that's how I survived from going to prison and accidentally saved the train. I told this story to a friend but he would not believe me, so I just let it go. TLDR, I saved train and no go prison. I used to sweat blue for a few months. My clothes, nails, and phone cover all got stained blue. It went away after a while on its own, which was good because the doctors couldn't figure it out. Opened the fridge and a jar of mustard came falling down. It hit the ground and I already thought, great, now I have to clean all of it up. But I genuinely didn't hear it hitting the ground. When I looked down there was nothing there. No glass shards. Mustard. Nothing. Looked around for a good 5 minutes questioning my reality. Turns out it kinda repelled off the ground and landed in the window shelf, next to the fridge. Like 1.5 feet above the floor. Upright. Standing. It straight up did a bottle flip off the floor. It dropped a solid 6 feet on hard ground and just bounced. Still questioning the laws of physics to this date. Once when I was 8 I was climbing out of the bathtub after showering. Since I was wet and sheet, my mom wrapped me up in a towel so my hands were wrapped as well. I ended up tripping over the edge of the bathtub and face planted onto the ground, where I just laid there kinda comatose for a second. So I tried to get up. Blood flowing down my face from a cut in my head and my nose. And my bucket of crabs nearby, this was a seaside resort, toppled over and went all over me. And they were like in a blood frenzy or something because they pinched me all over, so I started rolling on the ground. Lovely experience BTW. My family kinda just stared at me. I bled from my nose for 3 hours after being rescued from the crabs. And got sent to hospital, where my nose actually wasn't broken. My family refuses to acknowledge it ever happened even though I have a hospital bracelet with that date. Oddest thing ever. I was like 12 years old and played with my dog in the backyard. He suddenly stopped and just looked at my leg. There was a piece of wood in my leg. It was 8 centimeters long and in 90-degree angle in my leg. It didn't hurt. I didn't feel anything. To this day I'm wondering how this stick found its way into my leg. One time after school I was emptying my bag on my bed. I had a sandwich wrapped in cling wrap from lunch that I didn't eat. I dropped the sandwich on the floor and I went to pick it up. I couldn't find it anywhere. I checked under my bed, in my bag, all over the floor and under any items. I never found that sandwich. Edit. Thanks for the silver, kind stranger. Was crossing the border at the Golden Triangle from Thailand into Myanmar. Had a heat stroke due to dehydration and passed out in the middle of the street right after the passport control. Woke up to 5 armed soldiers pointing rifles in my face. Don't speak a word of Thai or any other Asian language. I signaled I need to drink water with my hands and they gave me a Coca-Cola and helped me sit down in a nearby chair. Once as a landlord I had to break up a 18-person orgy. We had noise complaints which were common, went to the room to check and things were odd. They would barely open the door to speak to me. They had the weirdest assembly of clothing on. And there was this weird salty smelling fog in the room. Finally, just for documentation sake, I had to have them sign my report and they said, "Do you want all of us to sign?" I said, "What?" They turned on the lights and in the middle of the floor was a giant pile of naked ass. We are talking every gender, every position. A clown, a midget, a toilet seat, all in one big pile gyrating. My presence wasn't going to stop the party. I then looked up at the TV. They had a gigantic 80+ inch TV, super high def, playing the most explicit porn I've ever seen. I mean, you could see razor burn. I had to shut down the party because the buildings were sheet and there was an occupancy limit in each room. You could only have 7 people in at a time. And they were over quota. All at once, like 15 angry naked people got up and started storming out of the room in various of degrees of nakedness. I had to return to my office to write a report up and were we told to be as explicit as possible, so I included the razor burn, the sloppy ham smacks sounds, everything. I got a call in the morning from the female manager going, "Yeah, we don't need that much detail. You are in trouble, the owner wants to speak with you." So she put on the elderly male owner and he exclaimed, "That was the best story I've ever read. Please write more." When I was a teenager I almost got run over by Robert Pattinson in my hometown. It's a smaller city between Bruges and Ghent. He was driving a Mercedes, probably on his way from Brussels to the hotel he was staying in on the coast. I'm 100% sure it was him. He was in Brussels for a premiere for the latest Twilight movie at the time. Only told my dad. When I was 9 or 10 years old, I was walking around in our flat and wondering what was itching below my foot. So I looked and I had a thumbtack sticking all the way inside my heel. I have no clue why, but it didn't hurt at all. I had a huge shock though. Also interesting to note that the hole is still there 12 years later. This happened 8 years ago. I, 10 years old, was walking my dog down the street with my father. And my dog decided to take a piss on the car wheel of a Mercedes-Benz. A couple minutes later that exact Mercedes-Benz slowly drives past us and then U-turns around and slowly drives past us again. This time he opens his window and shouts "duck you" to us multiple times without explanation. After cursing at us for like a minute straight he speeds off back into the neighborhood, so we just continue on our walk. As soon as we get back into our street we see the man walking towards us and pull out a gun. He aims it at us and shouts, "Your dog pee my wheel," over and over again. Of course my dad gets very angry and shouts back at him, "Do you think this is the ducking Wild West?" He then starts shooting at us but misses completely. Then my dad sprints at him and manages to tackle him to the ground. I go and get my mother and we call the police. Meanwhile my dad still has the guy pinned down. The police come and take the guy away and we then find out that he was a big Chinese drug dealer in the area. So this is basically the story of how my dad took down a Chinese gangster whilst unarmed. One day, completely out of the blue, my daughter, 8, started telling me she wanted to look out the window to see shooting stars. I told her it's very rare to see any shooting stars where we live, Yonkers, NY. She was really adamant that we should look and try to see one anyway. So I walk with her over to our living room window and look out with her. I swear not 10 seconds had passed before a meteor went streaking by. Closer than any I had ever seen. You could see the trail it left in the sky and it glowed bright red. She got so excited and ran to tell my wife that she saw one. My wife does not believe that me or my daughter saw a meteor that quickly. I swear on my life it happened. On my first day of school, in I think social studies, I had a certain feeling of content knowledge that I knew everyone. That kind of feeling you get when you've been there for a while. which didn't make any sense, as it was the first day of school and I knew I didn't know any of these other kids. Then the feeling went away as I questioned it, and I shrugged it off. Until during the last week of school, in the same class, bored and ready to go, I suddenly felt mildly panicked that I didn't know anyone, as if it was the first day again. Then I remembered how I felt on the first day. I think I experienced a time swap. I saw a girl who contracted a rare African parasite shoot crack, causing tiny worms to crawl out of the hole in her arm and from the corners of her eyes. It happened. I'm sure it did. I saw the worms. She held one up and said, "See? I told you. This is what they look like." I threw it on the floor and burned it with a lighter. I wasn't even on drugs because I had a drug test for probation in the morning. It's like my own brain is trying to convince me it didn't happen, but I'm sure of it. Posted this on Reddit already once, and people thought I was making it up. I joined the Mile High Club. It was on a flight from New York to London. I just wanted to join the Mile High Club for a thrill. Not because I had a fetish for ducking on airplanes or anything. It was quite uncomfortable and cramped, really. We had a difficult time finding a position that worked. As I was coming, we heard banging on the door. The flight attendant had somehow figured out and he began scolding us. Really giving us shit. We were panicking and trying to come up with a plan, worrying that maybe we'd get into serious trouble once we landed. In the middle of all this, the flight attendant came back with 2 glasses of champagne and winked at us. Once we realized he had been trolling us, our mood changed instantly from worried to amused as duck. I fell asleep listening to a CD one day and a little bit later woke up to it still playing and on at a part where they did a skit before a song. The skit was kind of funny, but there was one part I couldn't hear, so I got out of bed to rewind it, and when it played back it was entirely in French. I don't speak French but could understand what they were saying clear as day a minute earlier. I don't know what happened. During a trip to Williamsburg, I woke up in the middle of the night to an either Civil or Revolutionary War soldier, too dark and scared itless to tell, sitting on the foot of the bed. He got up and turned around, and I swear it was a boy no older than 15-16 and had a ragged bullet hole wound just below his neck. I'll remember that on my deathbed. When I was 6, I was in a car with my aunt. While she was driving, I opened door and fell out. Luckily she didn't drive fast. Probably she just started driving. I can't remember. So I wasn't hurt. I told that to my family several times already and they refused to believe. Few weeks ago, I was with my aunt and she told me that story and asked me, do I remember that? I have some vivid memories from when I was a baby. Most people's earliest memories are from when they are toddlers. But I remember bits and pieces of being an infant and getting breastfed by my mom. I also recall listening to her singing songs to me while rocking me and sitting in my crib for hours listening to music playing. I don't remember everything day by day, but there are quite a few memories from that time. My earliest memory that I can fully recall is hearing my mom and dad arguing in clear view of my crib. I don't remember what they were saying, but I know they were shouting at each other and I was getting upset because of it. Since I was in a crib, I know I couldn't have been a year old yet. Not sure if this counts, but I have a handful of chronic illnesses that basically cause me to be in significant pain more often than not. Despite this, I consider myself a very happy person and try my best not to let it get me down. But it certainly is difficult getting people to believe me, especially since I look fine. Whenever I describe my experience with these illnesses, people tend to think I'm exaggerating. It's not so crazy, but I feel like every time I've tried to tell it, people don't believe me. I was driving around a city pretty lost, before cell phones WGPS, and was stopped at the end of an alleyway waiting for an opportunity to turn when a cop pulled up to my right. He rolled down the window and motioned for me to roll down my window. I was of course super nervous, thinking that perhaps I drove erratically due to being lost, or maybe I'm somewhere I shouldn't be. Once my window was down, he does a "what's up" nod and asks, "Want a race?" I'm now even more confused, but he repeats the question. I tell him no and that I'm lost. He asks me where I need to go and I give him the name of the restaurant. He tells me to follow him and I get to follow him all across the city going through stop signs and lights. Stopping traffic every once in a while when he'd wave for me to pull over again and he'd park beside me and give me a heads up of what turns we'd be doing next. Led me all the way to the restaurant. It's actually a shared experience between me, two of my aunts and my sister. It happened when I was 11. My aunt was visiting our house. I lived with my mom, my other aunt and my two sisters. Both my aunts were talking and catching up and her son, my 6-month-old cousin, was getting fussy. I offered to take him and brought him back to my room to lay him on the bed and play with him. He was fine for a while but got fussy again, so I went to take him back to his mother. In the hallway closet on the way out to the living room and kitchen was our washer dryer. Someone had taken out clothes from the dryer and left the basket in front of it during the time I was in my room. I ended up tripping on the basket and my cousin fell out of my arms and into the air. This all happened in slow motion for me, but I remember catching myself, leaping forward and catching my cousin just before hitting the floor like he was a damn football. Suddenly it's really quiet. My youngest sister was staring from the living room couch and my aunts were staring, jaws dropped, at the kitchen table. He starts screaming and my aunt rushed over to pick him up and keeps thanking me and laughing hysterically out of nervousness, confusion and probably just the situation in general. We told this story to my cousin years later and he just doesn't believe us. We haven't shared it since, but my aunt made a joke about it when I was holding my own child and tripped a little over an area rug. You're clumsy, but I know you won't let that kid hit the floor. I once fired my rifle in a fight in Afghanistan while holding the arm of my colleague while my pants were around my ankles. I was doing this because I had to take a poop, and I was hanging my butt over an edge of a cliff, and my buddy was turned facing the other direction because I can't poop with people watching. Well, mid-push on a big log coming out my butt, we started taking fire and I was holding his trigger hand. I unslung my rifle, flipped the safety, and began shooting off to my right while still pooping. The biggest problem with all this was that it was a no wiper. After a few shots and me pinching off what was hanging, he let go and I pulled my pants up while he got into a fighting position. After the fight, I smelled like poop. I didn't wipe for 2 days until we got back to base. I did eventually wipe, but the damage to my underwear was already done. Those racing stripes never fully got washed out and I retired those underwear after that mission. None of our guys were hurt that day, but I did hold a ceremony for the lost whitey tighties by burning them. RIP in pieces. Edit, forgot a word. I once left my completely fine and working mobile phone in the kitchen and went to lay down for a little on my roommate's couch. He and I were alone at home and he is a very active gamer and was basically gaming throughout my nap. When I woke up I wanted to get my phone, but when I went and got it, it had the signal for SIM not connected on it. So I open up the phone to look at my SIM, just to find the metal part of the SIM card completely scratched and utterly destroyed. Of course I asked my roommate what he did to my phone, but he just said he was gaming the whole time and was just as astounded as I was. To this day we are completely flabbergasted and do not know what happened. But I am pretty positive that we have a poltergeist in our flat. One day in my freshman year of college I biked to Subway. Like halfway though my ride there my chains fell off. I was on campus and it was crowded, so I just walked my bike the rest of the way and figured I'd fix it later. I got my sandwich and came out to go eat it back at my dorm. My chain was completely fixed and was perfect. I was in there for less than 5 minutes. I don't know how it was fixed. My guess is some kind person noticed the chains were broken and just fixed them on the spot. I was thrilled but not without massive curiosity. This isn't very extreme. Just wanted to say it. I opened my bedroom door as a kid to see a creepy adult man with his back to me, hunched over, staring out the window. I said sorry, closed the door and ran to my parents. They checked the room and everything was normal. 10 years later I was checking out the cute neighbor girl in their yard and I heard a tiny sorry behind me and the door closed. Nothing there. I was home alone at the time. I just jerked off afterward, but I knew something weird had happened. 2 years ago I was visiting an old friend of mine who I hadn't seen in a while. And in a call prior to that she claimed she was possibly haunted. At the time she was struggling very much with depression and drug addiction. So I didn't put much thought into that. Fast forward, we are at her place cooking at the stove when a box of chocolate chips launches out of a cupboard. Not just falling down. It straight up got yeeted a few feet. We basically shrugged it off lol. Next day I was showering and the tap water turned itself on.